Hello and welcome everyone to our Hispanic Heritage Month Readers Advisory for Teens. My name is Isaiah West and I'm the Teen Services Coordinator for the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. Sorry, I'm spaced out just a bit there. And today we're going to share some of our favorite titles with Hispanic and Latinx characters. But first, we each want to tell you a little bit about a compelling read that kind of drove us into starting Hispanic Heritage Month Readers Advisory. And mine is Out of Darkness by Ashley Hope Perez. And it's a story that's set, it's a historical story, and it is slightly dark, and I don't want to downplay that at all, but it is a little bit darker than you might expect. But the reason that this story is so compelling, because even though there's a darkness within that story, it's a story that really needed to be told. And every time that I started to think that maybe the story was just a little too dark for me, I just kept pushing through. It was just such a good read. And sometimes good stories aren't the easiest stories to read, and they're not the easiest to process, but it doesn't make them any less valuable or any less amazing.
All right. So my name is Darlene. I'm a librarian at the Beltsville Library. And one of the more compelling books that I've read recently was With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. And we'll talk about another of her books later on. But the reason why I really liked With the Fire on High is that it was it was a very decidedly YA book, and it deals with teen pregnancy as well. But it doesn't focus on the teen pregnancy. It kind of just establishes it as sort of a decision or a mistake that she made, but it doesn't kind of stay stuck on it. It's kind of just like she just kind of rises above it and kind of chooses the best path forward following that decision. And so I just really like that it gave her like aspirations and like interest and like still kept her very much like the main character, still kept her very much like a teen. It's written in Acevedo's I think at this point like widely recognized like writing style. It's very poetic. And it's just one of those books that I feel like I would have definitely appreciated reading when I was younger, um, because it has a Latinx character, um, and so it has that representation. But at the same time, it's just a really fun, interesting YA book from a different perspective from my own, and I just really enjoyed it.
Hi, I'm Ileana. I work at New Kelton Library. I'm a library associate there for children's services. And then I would say like the book that was really compelling to me, like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. Um, I read this book in high school, and I really enjoyed the aspect how they, use food to portray emotions. Like Pita, the main character, she could cook anything, and then she can whatever she's feeling when she's cooking it. The other people in her family can feel the same thing. So I really enjoyed that book when I read it in high school. And then The Poet X. I'm going to talk a little bit about it in this reader's advisory, but that's another book that I really enjoyed, and I feel like if I would have read that in high school too, like I would have like gravitated towards it a lot more.
Sorry, I was muted. It's really interesting that you bring up like Water for Chocolate and the use of food in that book, because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's very it's a really big theme in With the Fire on High as well, like the
Mm-hmm.
ways in which like you can kind of express yourself or express emotions, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a sort of like creativity that comes through cooking, and how it's like a very like cultural but deeply
Mm-hmm.
personal experience.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that was if that book was one of her like influences for With the Fire on High, or if it's just like a cultural thing, because it seems to be in some other books as well. But yeah, I kind of like how those books kind of speak to each other in a way.
Yeah, and like, like cooking in general is like a fun thing to do, and like it brings people together. I feel like every culture has that. Every culture has, different, foods that they cook, and family come over, friends come over, and they enjoy it. So, I really like that book.
Okay, well, let's dive right in. And just so you know, all of these titles are recommended by the three of us, and they are all available at the library.
All right. So the first book is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo.
All right. So, look at that cover. It's beautiful. I really, really like the cover of this book. An Afro Latina with her beautiful hair. I really like it. Just putting it out there right now. So Elizabeth Acevedo, she is an Afro Dominican American slam poet. She is New York Times best-selling author. In 2018, she won the National Book Award for Young Readers Literature and honored with the 2019 Pura Bilpre Author Award for celebrating, affirming, and portraying Latinx culture. So I really like that about her already. She's actually the first person of color to win the Carnegie Medal for Poet X. So, round of applause for her. Um, yes. So, this book is about a main character named Xiomara. She's Afro Dominican American, and she faces like a few issues through her young life. I feel like this book talks a lot about, what she's been through, body acceptance. There's a self love and loving yourself, religion and women, how, sometimes, it's a little something, like I don't know how to explain it, but there's some issues there. So yeah, so I feel like it creates a lot of representation for Latinx, Black Latinx teens through this book. Um, it's a really easy. I feel like it's a really good read, emotional, and it's written in like a poetic style, slam. Because Xiomara in the book also does slam poetry. Um, yeah, but I feel like this book just represents Latinas or women in general that have dealt with what the issues of the main character dealt with. I really like this book. Like I said earlier, if I would have like read this book when I was in high school, I would have really enjoyed it. Because it talks a lot about loving yourself no matter what, and then trying to find yourself in the world.
Yeah, and it's so interesting just like how quickly one after the other she wrote these.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know if The Poet X was 2018
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
or
Wait,
sorry. I think it was 2018. Yeah, it was
yeah.
middle of 18.
yeah, so then it's like 2019 she wrote With the Fire on High, which is really good. And then she wrote Clap When You Land, which was released this year, and that one was really good too. So it's just like consistently making like really good and just I don't know, good YA books with like complex three-dimensional characters with different aspirations. I really love her writing style. And
Mm-hmm.
just kind of to reiterate what you were saying about like how we would have enjoyed these books in high school. That's not to say that we don't enjoy them now, but I think what
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to say is like we would have appreciated it so much more if these were available to us when we were younger.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, this is actually a perfect segue into an Elizabeth Acevedo story that I
Mhm.
have.
Hmm.
So I have been lucky to interact with Elizabeth quite a few times. But one of the stories that she always likes to tell is when she was teaching in Prince George's County. She had a student that came up and said that she just never saw herself in literature. Like she never saw herself in books, and that's why she didn't like to read. Like she thought that all these, dead white guys were boring. So Elizabeth started handing her all of the greats, and she devoured them. And then
Mhm.
she said, "Well, what's next?" So what Elizabeth did was dedicated this book to that girl in that class that she had. And I just think that that goes to show you the kind of person that she is and the kind of um, purpose that she has for writing these stories is not just to give us great stories, but
Mhm.
to show girls everywhere that they matter and that they have representation in the world and that they're not alone. I love that. And she's just amazing.
I agree.
Yeah. And it seems she's just really like integrated into like the community. Like she'll often go around and do things
Mhm.
like in the DC area. So
Yeah.
it's nice to see that. All right.
Yeah.
So sorry, Eliana, did you want to make a point?
No, I think we're good with, yeah, this book.
All right, so going from this book to like going from a book that I wish I had read in high school to one that I did read in high school. This is How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents, and I'm not going to talk too much about it just because I feel like it probably is on a lot of people's radars. This is me making the pitch for why you should read it if you ever see it on like your summer reading list. Um, so it basically follows the family, a family fleeing from a dictatorship in Dominican Republic. And what's really innovative about the book is that it's told in reverse chronological order. And so you see these characters as they're older, as they're adults, but it follows them kind of down into like adolescence. Um, and so it kind of just shows it shows kind of the immigration from a more privileged place since the Garcias had the connections to help sneak them out of the dictatorship in Dominican Republic. Um, and so you see sort of what that change means for them since they're used to an affluent life in the Dominican Republic, but they are barely middle class in the US. And it kind of brings in those ideas, I guess, about like what we value in immigration and just sort of because like I think the father did have a degree in Dominican Republic, but it wasn't like accepted here, and so he kind of had to go through that training again, and that was very hard for him. But the crux of the book kind of follows these four sisters and how they've each dealt with the trauma of essentially forced migration in different ways and how it heavily affects them as adults. Um, and so you kind of see the way that they navigate migration, identity, memory, language, and sexuality in their own ways. And I love Julia Alvarez's like attention to detail and her use of language. She's very poetic in how she writes, but even just one of the characters is named Yolanda, and she's sort of the protagonist of the book. I mean, there is no real protagonist, but she's sort of the protagonist. And she's definitely Alvarez's alter ego because she is the poet of the family. And her nickname is Yo, or her nickname is Yo-Yo, but sometimes they call her Yo. And that means I or me in Spanish. Um, and I don't know, there's so much about this book that's just very interesting and innovative for its time. People had said that it kind of challenged these assumptions that people have about multiculturalism and how like it's always going to be positive. because it shows how immigrant identity is affected by several things like ethnicity, your
Mhm.
gender, and even your class. And I feel like you get that through this book. And it was a Pura Belpre Award winner or no, she is a Pura Belpre Award winner, but this book, and I think, got the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Literary Award, which is awarded to works that present a multicultural viewpoint. So yes, just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Um, and so she has like a lot of other books that are really well known. In the Time
Mhm.
of the Butterfly, you'll,
It's my
uh,
favorite.
yeah, I mean, we talked about it.
Yeah.
Um, and then Before We Were Free, and she recently released Afterlife, which I haven't gotten around to. I don't know why, but definitely picking it up soon. But yeah, she's a really great writer and definitely, probably one of those writers that if you've been introduced to a Latinx author, it might have been her.
Mhm.
All right, so the next book is More Happy Than Not, and it's by Adam Silvera.
Okay, what to say about Adam Silvera? I'm going to talk more about his work in general, but this one is his first title, and it's about a teen that Aaron Soto, and he lives in modern day New York, or modern day in 2015 New York. But one thing that Adam Silvera does is he always throws a sci-fi twist on modern society. So during this book, you see a lot of ads for this procedure that erases specific memories. And there's this underlying like ethical debate happening about this procedure. And Aaron has always been kind of in the middle on the procedure itself and thinks that it's a little far fetched, but um, understands people wanting to forget things. And as Aaron is going through his life as a teen, playing sports with his friends, playing like games in the street, going to street festivals and cultural festivals, and hanging out with his family, he starts a friendship with another boy, and this friendship starts to blossom into something else. And this is just a really interesting take on contemporary sci-fi, or sci-fi light, as some like to call it. And I just think that Adam Silvera knows how to write a character, and he also knows how to just demolish you emotionally. Most of the titles on this list, I've read all of them, and I've cried probably in most of them. But yeah, so he's a really great author, and if this heavy romance aspect isn't your main jam, which this one is definitely more about like the coming out experience and things like that. But if you just want something a little bit more fast, fun, there's no coming out, anything like that. They Both Die in the End is another fantastic read that I would recommend. And that one is the same thing. It's set in the same world, but this company has developed a software that calls you at midnight the day that you're supposed to die, so that you have less than 24 hours to live. So he's a fantastic author and very intriguing.
I actually haven't read any of his work, but you sold me on him.
Mhm.
Like, I hadn't even considered it. I had heard They Both Die in the End was a really good book, but I kind of just like cataloged it as like one day I'll read it. But now I feel like I've moved that up a bit on my to be read list.
Me
Good.
too. Especially since it says it's like I like books that kind of like touch me and are emotional. I do want to read They Both Die in the End. I don't know how I'll handle it. Maybe sad. I don't know, but yeah,
Well,
I'm looking forward to that.
if you want a gut wrenching one from this list, History Is All You Left Me is one that's alternating timelines. So it's going from the
Mhm.
past to the present to the past to the present. Every other chapter had me just sobbing. Like it wasn't just like tears streaming down my face. Like I would have to stop in the middle of chapters so that I could ugly cry for just a little bit and then pick it back up. So,
Well,
yeah.
even the titles are very compelling. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, just reading history is all you left me. I'm like, I know I'm gonna cry.
Yeah. Well,
Agreed.
2 thumbs up from this librarian.
Okay. All right. So our next book is I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, and it's by Erica L. Sanchez. So let's see. I chose this book because I read it recently. Not recently, it was probably like when it came out, just because there was a lot of buzz around this book when it came out. It's not so often that you have like a Latinx coming of age story, and I think that there was a lot of press about it. And so the book follows Julia, and Julia is often reminded how she's not the perfect Mexican daughter, especially when the epitome of that superlative, I guess, is her older sister, Olga. Um, and she's more so reminded of this after Olga's passing. I think when we first read the book, like you already know that Olga has passed away. And so now Olga is kind of like immortalized as such. And so Julia feels like she'll always live in that shadow. And her parents, her teachers, and people in the community only reinforce this notion. And so Julia understandably can't stand this since she feels like no one can accept her for her. She's very strong, sarcastic. I guess some people would say like slightly confrontational. But it's also a strength. It's also this strength that I think makes it hard for people to realize that she is also dealing with the loss of her sister, that she is also grieving. And so it's actually in the midst of this grieving, she's in her sister's room, just kind of very obviously going through the process of grief, that she finds out that Olga may not have been the perfect daughter after all. And so she kind of like goes on this quest to try to figure her sister out. And I think along the way, she kind of comes to term with her own mental health issues, her sexuality, and establishing herself as her own person outside of her family. I think a common complaint that I see regarding this book is that she is not a likable protagonist. And I think that that's okay. I don't think that an author should focus on a protagonist being very likable, especially because, given everything that she's gone through, it's hard to think about being likable. She's dealing with grief, she's dealing with misogyny and her parents' expectations, and, just the trials and tribulations of being a teen. So I think it's a really funny and realistic book. And yeah, I mean, some of the themes that it touches on are mental health, family, tradition, and identity. And it was also nominated for the National Book Award for Young People's Literature.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this title. She was definitely not likable, though.
Yeah.
I will say that. But this was another like extremely compelling read. That even though there were times when you just wanted to throw your book across the room because she's done so many things that you're just like, why did you do that? But you keep going, and the end result in this one is just such a reward, and it's so worth the read.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I guess it proves the point that kind of just like as a teen, it's okay to make those mistakes, especially those repeated mistakes, because that's what that time is for, to kind of figure yourself out. Sorry, Eli, I cut you off.
It's okay. I was also gonna say like it's great that it like touches a little bit about women and you know in the Latino household, how they expect us to do a lot, like above and beyond, and makes us try to be like perfect, but we're not. And like you said, it's okay to make mistakes. I also feel like it's great that they touched a little bit on like the mental health aspect, because I feel like now like people are slowly like understanding some of the issues with mental health. But it's great that they use a little bit of that in this book, because in a Latino culture, and just in probably different cultures in general, they just put mental health in a corner. They don't really talk about it. They just like, oh, just deal with it, deal with your emotions. It's more than that. But I feel like this is great that they like talked about it a little bit in this book.
Yeah, I feel like it deals with a lot of themes
Mhm.
that I appreciated that they would talk about it, especially in a cultural context as well. Like the fact that you don't really talk about your emotions, or that you don't really consider therapy. Like, I think her mom doesn't even really go to therapy. I want to say that she kind of finds like a support group through her church, which is not to say that there's anything wrong with that,
Yeah.
but it's almost just kind of like feeling like you just have to find avenues to kind of get through it, as opposed to really realizing that these are emotions and like issues that you're kind of dealing with internally. Yeah, I don't know. I really appreciated that sort of larger discussion.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, even just the idea of what it means to be considered like the perfect Mexican daughter in this case, but I think a
Mhm.
lot of Latinx cultures can probably attest to this.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, like what makes Olga perfect in the book is that she dressed like modestly. She kind of like never talked back. She would always cook for her family. She worked and helped out with like financial
Mhm.
issues, and then like she didn't go away for college,
Mhm.
and even then put her education on the back burner to help her family. And so those were the ideal qualities, and that's
Mhm.
sort of the expectation that's set for Julia. And so that's why I didn't really, I mean, I understand why she was an unlikable character, but it was
Mhm.
just like, you just had to realize like everything that was stacked up against her, and her overall, like her persona is pretty much the opposite of that.
Mhm.
And she's kind of trying to like prove herself and her self-worth to these people um, who don't find value in her as a person just yet. Yeah.
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 All right. So our next book is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sans. I don't think we quite figured out how that was supposed to be pronounced.
Sans,
Oh,
I think.
Sans.
Sans.
Um, so this title is a very quiet um, piece of literature. It follows Aristotle, or Ari, and Dante, who are young in the beginning of this, two young Hispanic boys who meet, and an instant friendship is kind of connected. And as their friendship starts to blossom, Dante goes away to school. And Ari has never really had to focus on friendships or relationships in general. So when Dante leaves, he really starts trying to immerse himself in other avenues, and really just other ways to not be like his brother. Um, and One of those ways is weightlifting. So he gets, super swole, and he becomes a bit more attractive to the ladies. And he has a girlfriend, and he has a couple of friends that are guys that do stupid guy things that you just kind of expect. And then Dante comes back. And as Dante returns, he brings back what is not a secret to him and his family, but is a secret to the rest of their town in West Texas. And it's that Dante is gay. And as he slowly comes out and starts to date someone, um, he makes Ari come to terms with some of his own anger and some of his own resentment toward himself. And this title is just so moving and so powerful. And It's so character driven. You are rooting for Aristotle and Dante from the very beginning. And even though you see anger and resentment and betrayal and loneliness, like you just want them to have all the happiness in the world. It touches on a lot of identity themes, especially identity within the queer community, as well as identity within the Latinx community. Dante and his family are not traditional, whereas Aristotle and his family are very traditional. And seeing kind of the juxtaposition of the two families is just really interesting. Um, this title has been rumored to have a sequel coming at some point. So you can hold out hope that maybe we will see more of Ari and Dante. But one thing that we all kind of talked about was this cover and how
Yes,
beautiful it is.
Yes.
I love that cover.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. And I also really love that it's a book about um like a Latinx family or Latinx culture and then the LGBTQ plus community, because I feel like that's something that you don't see very often. Um and I guess, it's a larger issue with like representation, but I love it when there are when more like writers of color are given a voice to kind of share different experiences, so that like there are a myriad of experiences out there and there's something that someone out there can relate to.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, Darlene, with the Latinx representation and LGBTQ plus. I feel like I really want to read this. I haven't read this book, and I want to read it. And it's great that, like you said, how authors of color are, using representation in this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so our last book is Mexican Gothic, and it's by Silvia Moreno Garcia. It was released very recently, in June of 2020, and it has rightfully gotten a lot of hype. So this book follows, well, it's set in the 1950s Mexico. And so it follows Noemi, who's a socialite who isn't quite ready to settle down. She loves socializing and can't quite narrow what she wants to major in college because she's interested in a little bit of everything. So the novel kind of starts off with her getting a strange letter from her newly married cousin, basically telling Noemi that she fears her new home. And so, wanting to make sure that everything is okay, as the letter is very uncharacteristic for her cousin, she sets out to visit. Um, she sets out to visit, and so her cousin now lives in this like colonial mansion called High Place in a small town that was in a small town that was known for silver mining. And so she meets the old patriarch of the family, who seems very interested in eugenics and Darwinism, and kind of Noemi herself. And she also meets her cousin's husband, who is very alluring, but is slightly distant and kind of menacing. And so soon after she visits for the first time, Noemi starts to dream some like horrible nightmares about the house. And so she realizes that there may be some truth to her cousin's letter. And as a protagonist, Noemi is very strong. She's witty, she's knowledgeable, and you can't help but kind of root for her as she uncovers um, more information about this mysterious family and their eerie residence. Um, it has really good pacing, and I will say that the ending is a bit confusing, but it's still a thrilling read nonetheless. Um, it is considered like a gothic fiction, like historical fantasy, and kind of touches on the themes of colonization sexism, eugenics, and racism, which I feel like is it's a really innovative way to kind of discuss those topics, to do so in like a Gothic genre theme. Yeah, it's really interesting. And it is on the New York Times bestseller. And she actually has another book called The Gods of Jade and Shadow, which after reading this one, I'm like really excited to kind of to read and to just know more about, because I think she is a good writer. So yeah, I feel like this is for anyone who's kind of, I don't know, maybe through reading classics for school or just for fun, has read some other Gothic fiction, like, I don't know, Mary Shelley's The Frankenstein or Jane Eyre. I think they would kind of feel right at home reading this book.
Yeah. You know, I would say I do want to read this book because I really love books that have like thriller, mystery, and fantasy. That's like great. So I do want to read their other book, The Gods of Jade and Shadow. I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to that one too.
Yeah, so that one, a little bit about that one is, I think it's the character kind of opens something, and so then her soul is tied to, was it the
Yeah, I feel like it's
second god of death, I think.
the Mayan. It's Mayan god.
Mayan. Yeah, so the Mayan god of death, and so I think she has to like help him regain his power. And so I don't know, I thought it was really interesting the way that it kind of fuses, like in this case, like Mayan mythology to sort of more present day. So it sounds really interesting. And both of these books are adult fiction. I do want to mention that. But I feel like it doesn't deal with anything that I don't think, you know, a teen reader or a young adult reader wouldn't be interested in. Or, yeah, I feel like a teen or a young adult reader would still be at ease reading these books.
I agree. I think there's a lot of teen appeal, especially in this title. And I think that this author just writes with a lot of teen appeal because I read The Beautiful Ones, and I think that's another one that, even though there might be some mature content in there, it's not any more mature than things that we would see in movies or TV. And it's just the way that she writes is so enthralling. And I mean, if we're talking about covers, I know we mentioned it, but this cover was perfect for this slideshow. Like, it's just so, I don't know, you just look at it and you're like, oh, I have to read this. Like, and
which is
also
exactly
like,
what happened.
where do I get that wallpaper? Like, that's the other thing that I'm thinking.
Yes. It really communicates exactly, like, it communicates the title very well, right? Like, there is that Gothic wallpaper, and then she is in a very, like, I don't know that it would be really traditional Mexican dress, but just very similar, like, I don't know.
Kind of looks like a quinceañera dress, you know, but not with the pink dress, but kind of classic quinceañera. Yeah. Awesome.
Yes, I loved this cover, and I'm okay that I read it because of the cover. Because it worked out in the end. It was a really good read. All right, so we just wanted to kind of leave you with some upcoming YA titles. Yes, are there any that you guys are looking forward to in particular?
I would say Oculta.
Oculta.
Yeah, I'm gravitated towards that one. Oculta. It's like occult, right? Oculta, and in English is occult.
Yeah, I am also gravitating toward one that is a bit more occult centered and macabre, and it is The Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. I actually got a listening arc to that, and I'm currently listening. I'm in the last like quarter of the book now, and it is very, very interesting. And the premise is that a trans boy is I've struggled with this. It's a brujo, I guess. Like, I don't know how you would say that, like, as he has transitioned,
Mhm.
but is trying to get his family to understand that he is male, and he and his best friend try to bring someone back from the dead, and they end up bringing back a popular boy from their high school who's recently died, and he does not want to go back to the spirit world. So it's funny and it's kind of
Ooh.
creepy, and I'm loving it.
It's a really interesting concept or idea, just because because you're already dealing with this idea of like identity and transitioning and a trans character, but then to do so with something culturally that's very much tied to like womanhood and femininity, the way that brujeria is,
Mhm.
I think it's a really good avenue to explore identity. So I'd be curious to check it out as well.
Yeah.
The other one, just purely on the title alone, that I'm gravitating towards is A Cuban Girl's Guide to Teen Tomorrow. Like, that one should have a nice cover, and if it doesn't, I'll be kind
Oh,
of
you
sad.
haven't? You
I
need to
haven't
look
seen
up
it.
the cover. I'm going
Okay.
to suggest that everyone leave this session, look up that cover because it's super cute and it's just going to make you want to read it more.
I can't even wait. I'm like doing it right now as I should be recording this. Oh, that is very cute.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I'm sold. It'll be a next read.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about our titles that we have selected for teens. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments and we will try to answer them as quickly as we can. And if you are catching this and these titles are just a little too old or mature of theme for you, check out our recording on Reader's Advisory for Tweens. We did it just before this one, and we have some really awesome titles for middle school there. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great
Thank
day.
you. Bye.